feeling. It's alright, this happened once before. I'm fine, I'm fine.
Welcome to This Happened Once Before, a podcast conversation between generational Phish fans. I'm your host, Bill, and this week I'm joined by Powell, a recent convert to the band. We talk about his musical journey before Phish and how being open and present are such an integral part of this experience. Bringing his unique professional perspective on the mental aspects of being a fan, he demonstrates how positive it is to experience new things and makes this an enjoyable conversation. I will share my thoughts on Powell's show suggestion before next week's episode. In last week's episode, Reed chose 9-6-15 from Dick's Sporting Goods Park, Commerce City, Colorado. We returned to Dick's for another recommendation, and Reed's cool credentials keep increasing after this one. From the opening notes of the landlady, Mike's bass resonated in my ear, and this would continue for the remainder of the show. At first, I thought Reed was trying to blow this old man's eardrums, but I persevered and look forward to re-listening to this on the stereo speakers versus the headphones. A sound straightforward 13-song first set, highlighted for me by Prince Caspian's Scent of a Mule and Saw It Again, and introduced two new songs to me I was unfamiliar with, Halfway to the Moon and The Birdwatcher. Down with Disease and Carini really kicked the second set into higher gear and really set the course for the remainder of the show. Steam, which for some reason reminds me of the Stephen King's Dark Tower series, and A Smoking Piper and Slave make this an immense second set. And I can't forget the Silent in the Morning with the horse, as Reed pointed out as well. And of course, the very fishy thank you encore makes it an incredibly special show. So excellent recommendation, Reed. So thank you. Enjoy this week's episode as we look at Phish's concert from 5/14/92 at the Capitol Theater in Port Chester, New York, on This Happened Once Before podcast.
It's alright, this happened once before. I'm fine, I'm fine.
Welcome to another episode of This Happened Once Before, a podcast between generational Phish fans as we talk about their experience, how they got to the band, what they love about the scene so far. And then we break down a show from a bygone era of the band, somewhere between 1988 and 1996. So today I'm lucky to have with me another new addition to the fan club. Who am I lucky to have with me?
Hi, my name is Powell.
Powell, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So how long have you been into the band?
Probably a year and a half now. It's crazy. It felt like when I was preparing for this podcast, I had in my head that, yeah, it's probably been like 2 or 3 years I've been listening to them. And then I went to look at when the exact date of my first show was. And like, oh my God, that's only been a year and a half. So last summer was really when I first got into them.
And have you got a chance to see them live yet?
I have. At this point, I've been to 4 shows, and I must say it keeps getting better and better. And my addiction keeps growing wider and wider, and it's been really
good. Healthy one. It's a healthy addiction, though. You know, there's good ones and bad ones, but this is a healthy one for sure.
That is for sure.
But 4 shows in a year, that's impressive, right? Like, and you know, I think I spoke to Ivy about that. She's like, "Well, I've only been to 5 shows." I'm like, "They only play 50, right? This isn't a band that tours 300 dates a year. So it's almost 10% of what they played, you know, in the last year. So it's a healthier way to look at it when you want to look at it that way. You're catching 10% of the tour. What was the best show you've seen so far?
Well, I would say that so in the 4 shows, and I must say maybe there's a 5th added in because I saw Tab at a festival as well. Do we count that into the mix?
I think you could count that into your experience, right? Because it really is a different band, right? Yeah. And its essence, it's a live wire band in my opinion, right? Like they're kind of a live wire, that one. But I would include it in your overall experience for sure, definitely.
Great. So yes, in the let's say 4 or 5 shows I've seen, I must say that it feels like my first one is the one that I really, really loved, perhaps because it just opened me to the whole world, and it really it felt like an explosion that I couldn't get enough of after that, because before that I my introduction to the band was really through Spotify, listening to studio albums, and then when I came to see them live, it was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And so the shows after that were good, but there were, and perhaps some of the song choices that were in some of those shows after may have been better than the show that I went and saw. However, that first show would really open my eyes to what Phish was all about, and made me catch the bug. So, yeah.
So would you say that like that first show, if you, as you're looking at those 4 shows so far, right? That one obviously weighs the heaviest on you, though it may not have been on paper the best Phish show. You know, somebody might be like, "What are you talking about? This show was way better." And as much of this experience is unique, right? Like I think that's it. That's the purpose of all this, right? Because I could come together with you and you know, we could get to the end of this conversation and I'd be like, hey, what do you think about that show from 92? And that we just talked about, you're like, no, I didn't like it. Right. So I think there's something to the experience for all of us there where that's a night by night thing. And I think that's why people chase them all the way across the country, because it's that experience, right? Because then it's when am I going to get that again? Right? You're chasing it. And then it's like, okay. And you know it's possible because you see it and you see set lists pop up. You're like, I want that song. I want that.
Mhm.
So very cool. What was it about that first show that really set you on that path?
I think it was how different the band is from any other band I've seen before. And any other, as I've tried to dive into the uniqueness of them, they are just so different than any other band that I've ever seen. And part of that is how in what people that listen to Phish already know is that they play a different set list every night. You never know what you're going to get. And the fact of how they come out and they just like, it's not regimented. I've never like I watch a lot of bands from a lot of different genres and I love music. And the fact that they can come out and play a song differently, and as I'm watching, they're going in directions that they didn't even know they would go in, like that is so enticing to me. And I had not really been into jam bands before, but for that, and when I was in that night and they were jamming, and I was just like so hooked on to every note from every instrument, it was like that was just a different experience than I've ever had. So those are a couple things that really had me going in.
No, I think that's a great explanation of the experience, right? I think that could be distilled down for everybody who walks in those doors. You know, I think that's an interesting premise when you say there that you know, this band, jam bands. What were you listening to before Phish? Like, what was the bands that you were into?
Well, I mean, I just run the gauntlet of every genre. Like randomly, like if we look at like hard rock to soft rock to the 90s and the 2000s to 80s and 70s, and from I got into like a classical kick like randomly
Sure.
a couple years ago, which also right after that, like with Phish and their longer songs and how there's different movements in the songs by design from Trey and his experience, like like I it's hard for me to even choose one band that I'm really into. I love reggae, like it's and
Sure,
so
sure. So let me ask you a
yeah.
different way. Were you into improvisational music before
No,
Phish? Okay,
no.
so that
And
was what I was. Yeah, okay, that's what it sounded like when you were saying this tapestry that they were painting. You know, I was someone who a long time ago I worked with. They were big into heavy metal, but like that operatic Opeth heavy metal. And he's like,
mhm.
"What is it with that band and you?" Right? And I was like, "Look, here's the thing. Imagine watching Picasso paint a picture."
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And sometimes it's going to be a masterpiece, and sometimes it's going to be shit. But you get to be there for it. Like that's the deal. Like you get to sit there and watch them throw the paint, and all of a sudden you see it all come together in front of you. And I think that's really magical what you said, right? Because that doesn't necessarily that experience isn't you have to go into that open. You know, I think that improvisation automatically has to lead you to coming into this open because if you go into a mindset of like, when are they going to play that song? When are they going to play that radio song? When are they going to play the hit? You know, you're going to have maybe not the best time that you could have had if you opened yourself up to be like, what's next?
They're the only band I've ever seen that does it. Like it, and you know, you go to all these big acts. I'm from Saratoga, New York, and so the SPAC is right there, a couple minutes away from my house, and so they have a season pass. So like I get the season pass to music there. So I'm there all summer, and so like the big acts of great 90s bands like I don't know, like the Counting Crows, or like bands like that. Okay, you go on to setlist.com and you see every song they're going to play in the order that they're going to play it. They play it the same way every night, and it's the same act. Whereas Phish is just obviously not that way. And yes, of course, there are other jam bands, and the Grateful Dead. I had not been into the Dead before, more recently as well. Pretty much Phish got me into the music more than broadened me into the Dead. And but that even said, I know there's other bands out there that look to be improvisational. I just haven't listened to them yet.
Yeah, and I think, like only a year in, you have to kind of regulate what you can take in, right? You're drinking through a fire hose with one band, right? This is a band, and that was kind of the rationale for my starting this podcast, was that it was really interesting to me, seeing my first show 30 years ago this year, coming up 12/29, and going to a show in October, right? And watching two different bands. Like in my head, I'm like, that's not the band. I love this band, but that's not what hooked me. This isn't what got me to love Phish, right? There's parts of it they still pump out, but this is a completely different carnation of the same thing 30 years later that 12-year-old kids are getting into, adults are getting, people are finding their way to them because the sound is different, right? So it's the new entry to the old music is kind of where I wanted to go with this, because when I hear some of these new songs, I I think Trey's writing some of the best songs of his career. And you now listen back to these old shows that I started out, I'm like, it was all about just playing a million miles an hour, right? Like that's what we were there to see. And it's beautiful now because this four-headed monster that exists on any given night that comes out is worth the price of admission, maybe not the Sphere right now, but like anywhere to go see them, right? I don't think there's a better live performance anywhere in the country when they're playing.
And I can't wait to talk more about that.
Yeah.
About the difference between the earlier days and now, because I don't actually have the ability to always talk to people about this. I've got a girlfriend that does like the band a lot, and she's certainly capable of the conversation and wants to have it. But outside of that, none of my friends listen to Phish. When I'm at I try to get some people. But when I go to shows, they're always with her. So, and then we're not like talking to tons of people. So it's like I don't really have a conversation a lot about the band. And so I can't wait to hear it from your perspective.
Cool. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So how familiar, I mean, it's only been a year and you've seen some live shows. Have you dipped back into the catalog from like 88 to 96 at all? Have you heard any shows from that era?
Well, I think I have. I think I'm more in line to say that I've listened. There's a lot of songs that I really have loved, and I want to know how they play them differently in the different eras. So I have gone back to those earlier shows and have wanted to hear how they've played Harry Hood and Stash and Possum, and how You Enjoy Myself might be different from those decades. David Bowie, like those are some of my favorite songs. I mean, they're most popular songs, I would say. I think, I assume
compositions wise for sure. Yeah, Bowie. Yeah, like anything that still stands up, and that's been a really interesting part of this experience doing these podcasts is the quantity of material that's still in rotation today, that's been in rotation since 1988, and it sounds lazy, right? And we all know as fans, like, that's not lazy. No, this song is completely different than it was in 92 when we go back and listen to it, right? And I think that's part of the beauty of unpacking this band is it's like a choose your own adventure book, right? You could go down any path you want to stick to live, you want to go down song specific ways, Halloween, New Year's, there's just so many ways to attack it. So that's a great way we're going to do this. So is there part of the part of the scene now, what is it that attracts you besides the music, like the larger element? Is there something that you think is unique to music in general? You say you go to a lot of concerts and SPACs, so you see a lot of people pulling in and out of that parking.
I think there seems like countless things that makes the scene really great. And and are we comparing this to the olden days, what I may have missed,
No,
or
I
just what
think
makes
just
the
in
scene really
general.
great now?
Yeah, I think, it'd be tough for you to answer that one, right? Like, and I think
Yeah, yeah,
I could add to that. I can ask you that question a different way. Like, is there something you think you missed on? But I think now what I'm asking is like, how would you compete? You spend a summer at SPAC, right? Hitting all Counting
yeah.
Crows, whoever comes through town, which sounds amazing summer. But these fan bases, what do you see as like something maybe that is not besides a huge differentiator, but maybe unique.
I
Um,
think I think the passion of the fans is by far way different than I see with any other any other group, and that's what's really like the fact that there is a shakedown. It's like my first shakedown, like was going to that, and of course you all are very tuned to that and always have that. But like it was quite an experience to have my first one of those and to experience that. Um, and to see how much people are into it, how much they're on all of these forums on social medias and they're constantly posting things. There's always chatter about it. The support for each other, it just seems so different than I've ever experienced. There, and I think part of that is like they keep us hooked in. Like if they were doing one show every single night over and over again, like no one cares after they've seen them that one night. Like, oh, there's nothing new. I think we're creatures that like uh to see new things, and it motivates us to keep coming back. So the fact that I'm like buying an app, have a monthly subscription to like dive into all their different shows to hear how they played it, like that's just crazy. Like no other band does that, right? That's why I love. That's why I think makes them really unique. Is there multiple nights of music? They're playing different set lists every night. Like everybody's tuned in all the time to want to hear what is coming tonight, and that is what I think really draws me to the band, and what I think actually keeps people coming back is that sense of newness that's always there with them.
I agree. It's you're opening up Christmas presents every time you go see them, right? Like you don't know what you're gonna get, but you're gonna get something good, and you're gonna be really happy when it's all over. And I think that's the mindset. I think it's a mindset of the individual who sees them as well, right? Not just the band, because I think the folks who may go to see Counting Crows would be mad if they didn't play the hits, right? They don't want to hear the new album, right?
Yeah,
So they're
yeah,
not going to
yeah.
give them that opportunity to express themselves with the maybe one or two songs off the new album, but
Mm-hmm.
where Phish would be like, "Hey, we are writing all these songs and we're going to play them all in the second set. Hope you like them," and everybody be
Uh-huh.
like, "Did you see that set list? They played all the new songs,"
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think it's that ability as humans, like to your point, like I think there's a certain part of us as humans that need that constant shakeup of stimulation, right? Versus there are some people who like it stagnant, right? Like, oh, they got to play it. If they don't play it, I'm in trouble. But like, yeah, I think that's what we sign up for with this band is that element of fun and surprise and excitement that you don't know what's going to happen in the next minute and the next minute and the next minute until it's over. And that's the most fun you could ever have as an adult so far. I figured out.
Yes. And to go on that point for a little bit, if we just on why I love the band, it is so it's so I'm a mental health guy. I'm a therapist, and I work with performers. So my whole gig is to work with people on how they can perform the best they can in what they do. And so when I and so Trey's way of performing, where the whole band's way of performing is to go out and not necessarily have it all together, just to be completely in the moment and play what comes to them. It is this artistry, like you said, like it's a painting in that way. So that is where people perform at their best, and they're able to give their best expression of themselves, and they do it so well together that it makes them absolutely amazing at what they do. So I love that piece of them, which no one else does, and it seems like in the music scene where they just come out and they're completely present. But what also I think I love about it, and I imagine in the psychology of why so many people also love them, which is also makes them different, is that while we're watching a show, we are so in the moment ourselves. Like we have to be locked into every note as they play it. They pull us into every note as they play it, waiting to see how they express their musical gift. And so no one's on their phones. Everyone's completely in the moment. And we know that the more we can be in the moment, the more the better it feels. And then there's these constant awe-inspiring moments that they give us. So in that way, like, they have figured out how to both create beauty in their expression of their art, but how as fans we get sucked into that for how it makes us feel. So
100%.
there's a little bit of a deeper
Yeah.
angle, Maya. Yeah.
No, and I think, I don't know if you've seen it and or heard it, but for the vinyl the Baker's Dozen set that they did at Madison Square Garden, there's a vinyl collection. And I was reading something or watched a video with Fishman being interviewed, and the image they chose for like the inlay is MSG, them on stage, right? And to your point, however many people are on the floor, you can see in this image, the garden's what, 18,000. So say you see like 14,000. Nobody's on the phone. Everybody's locked in forward. Everybody's looking at the thing and participating, to your point, right? And I think it's hard in modern times to participate in mass levels like this, other outside of organized religion and political rallies. Like, honestly, and I'm not trying to incorporate those things into Phish, but just groups of people who are passionate about something coming together to create a moment. There's not many public squares for that anymore. And I think then you add that layer to your point of, hey, here's a bunch of people at a band who's like, whatever, let's go. Like, whatever. I'm not here with any expectation. I'm just here. Is something that's impactful and learned, right? I think the band's learned it. That's not an inherent trait for anyone. Maybe a Dalai Lama, I don't know, but not anybody in America, I can tell you that. So I think that's a really astute observation. I don't think it's deep on another level. The conversation I have with Reed, the one that just came out, we talk about a concert that I was at, and I said to him, like, look, this is the closest I've ever had to a religious experience. Like, I was not on psychedelics. I was like, the energy of the crowd got me to a goosebump level, like where I felt part of something larger in the moment, right? And we comes across on tape all these years later, right? I'm like, wow, that still is impactful. So yeah, no, I think that's part of why we come back. I think that's 100% of the reason why we come back. It's never the same thing twice, and that keeps them motivated. That keeps us, engaged. And I think it's provided them now with, I hope for them, fearlessness, right? Where like they don't feel any pressure to do anything except for what's coming out of their creativity, right? There's no boss to answer to, no, tour managers, none of that stuff. It's like, we're just gonna do our thing, because they really are on all cylinders, heading into MSG this year. So people are going to be really very excited for that one. Is there anything you felt you missed, like from that? I know you've only been in a year. We kind of touched on this before, but do you see something or hear something like, oh, I would have loved to have been part of that?
Well, maybe a couple of things, and one might be a personal thing that I probably missed myself, rather than what they would have been doing differently. But I would say one thing is the fact that if I was younger watching, I would have been able to tour and go on the road and watch. I've got 2 kids now that I'm fully responsible for, and the ability to take that many days is not possible. So I would have done that a lot earlier in my life.
Sure.
And I cannot do that anymore. But it seems like a few things that I would say it seems notable that they don't really do anymore. It's like they don't give us a lot of game henge, it seems, and I think that might be something that I would have been into. And just like them diving into that unique. It seems like if I do listen to certain shows from the earlier times, they had a lot more, and maybe I'd like to hear your opinion on this, like a lot more creativity in like doing odd things up on stage, and like going more off the cuff, talking more, like it seemed a little more wild in their approach. And is that a big difference?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely more wild, right? Because they were young too, right? To your point about why when you were younger you could have been touring, well, they were rock stars, right? So like, I think that was part of the attraction then too. one of the things I mentioned in like why I started it was because like when when I found Phish, I had recently had just found the Dead, not too much before that. So trying to unpack 40 years of music, I was like, how the heck do you even start on this, right? So here's this band that's like young, ferocious, on their way up, coming up. And, that was kind of part of it, right? Like much how we feel like today, you don't know what they're going to do. It was even elevated more, right?
Mhm.
Because they were kind of punk rock too, right? Because this is the time of MTV and they're doing it
Yeah.
without MTV. This is the time of terrestrial radio. They're doing it without radio, and it's word of mouth and it's their performance and word of mouth, right? Because word of mouth means nothing if they're not delivering. And I think that's where the energy comes from because it's new, right? It's
Yeah.
still new. But what I think is still there, to counterpoint what you said a little bit, is the creativity.
Yeah.
It may not
Yeah.
feel as guerrilla as it did back in the day, like the chess where they were playing chess against the audience. Like that's a band who's touring 200 nights a year. Like you're getting creative when you're on the road all the time. Now it's like, hey, we're gonna bring in folks from Broadway and create a whole thing in MSG because we
Absolutely.
can. So I think it's all a matter of age and time and place, like most things in this world, right? It's just, yeah, it definitely felt that way. But I was younger too.
Hmm.
So, I know back to two shows in a row now, I'm a lot more tired than I used to be after two shows in a row.
That's a great point. Yes.
Yeah, so
And
that would be
and
my
on that
thought.
point, and on that point as well, it's one thing that I may have missed that may go along with that bit of wildness from them uh, is perhaps how the music has changed with them being under the influences of substances.
100%.
As I said, I'm a mental health guy, and I love this sense of altered consciousness and how altered consciousness changes our creativity and how we perceive things and how we view things and how we go about our expression. So certainly if they are experimenting with different types of substances, I would have been very into seeing how that changed their expression of their music when they were on them.
Yeah, I think, pick which lane and you'll find out which way, right? And I think that's
Mhm.
the issue. If you wanted, there's a stretch in the 2000s, if, you can really hear what people call oxy jams, right? Like that's what the band was participating with. And to the point of what we were talking about earlier, when that this era, 88 to 96, felt much more, lack of a better word, organic, natural. I don't know. I wasn't backstage. I have no idea. I'm not
Mhm.
casting any. I know where I was at.
Uh-huh.
Um, but now to your point of being sobriety and altered consciousness comes in different ways. I know, isolation tanks, things along those lines have played in the role of the band throughout history. Without any kind of added experience to that. So I know that transcendental meditation has been part of the band. People who practice improvising, I think that, this is something that they did early on that, that's meditative, I think, in a way, right? When you're trying to tune in with three other people and creating practices to improvise. That was blew my mind when I'd heard that back then. I was like, how do you practice to improvise, right? But it's about being in the moment, being together. So
Mhm.
I'm going to jump into the questionnaire, and I think we got some good ones here that you're gonna get your answers out on. So first one I always like is what was the first Phish song you ever heard?
Well, I don't like it came off of Spotify, and I don't remember exactly what it
Okay.
was. But I would say the first one that I listened to before a concert that really like hit my ears and like, oh, I love this. It was First Tube was the first song
Oh
where I was
yeah,
like, I really tuned into that. I'm like, and then I listened to it like several times when I might have been exercising, and I'm like, damn, I love this song.
that's
So
a
First Tube.
that's a Phish exercise song for sure. Yeah, that's a good one for a good
Yeah.
run. Absolutely.
Yes.
You said you've been to four shows already. What was the first one you attended?
I went to Bethel Woods. That was in mid-July 2022. Second night, they went there. They had two nights there. I went to the second night, and the first song on that night was a song called "The Evening Song," which I loved. It was a great song, and it was great. It seemed like a great first set like song, like "Welcome to this evening," and like be aware of the the evilness that could be upon us. And I loved that song. I think that the two songs that really caught my ear that night was "Divided Sky," which happens to be it's certainly one of my favorite songs now, and I think Carini was another one that night that was like, oh my.
That's
So,
and really the opposite ends of the spectrum there too, right? And
yes, yeah.
was that also the most favorite show you attended, as you mentioned earlier? The Bethel
Yeah, I
Woods?
guess
Was
so.
that?
I guess so. Yeah.
So
And for different reasons.
yeah.
I like the other shows too.
No, absolutely. Listen,
Yeah.
everybody, I'm closing in on over 100 shows, and like sometimes it's hard, Like I think I have it narrowed down to 2, but then hopefully the next one changes it, right?
Sure.
So and hallowed ground. I mean, Bethel Woods. You talk about being spiritual in the moment. There's some vibes coming out of that dirt, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
What's the song you haven't heard yet live that you really want to hear live?
I think there's a couple, and it probably goes towards like Stash. I mean, those songs I mentioned earlier, Stash, David Bowie, um, Reba. I'd love to hear live. You Enjoy Myself is a song I haven't heard. Like those real like hits, I would love to hear live, and I have not yet. Perhaps a song that I will say is another song that I heard that first night that is maybe a song people don't really think about as much with them, but I've played it thousands of times probably, is Turtle in the Clouds. I loved that song when I heard
That
it.
song has
So,
grown on me tremendously. There's a little dance to it too, if you really want to get to know.
yeah.
I
Well,
saw it in
they did
Pittsburgh.
that.
Yeah.
They did that dance. So, like,
They didn't do it in Pittsburgh, and somebody up front must have said something, and Trey was like, "Yeah, we didn't want to do it because we want to play more music, so we're just gonna play more music now." I was like, "All right, no dance."
okay, fine.
All right. Is there a show you listen to on streaming on that you didn't attend that you really really enjoy?
I think so. And it goes back. Funny, you gave me a show to listen to, which was May 92. And 3 days later, they played at Union hockey rink or Union rink in Schenectady, New York. And that show is the perhaps one show from that really early on time where I just listened a ton to that show. I loved that show. It was probably a late night. I think I was coming back, and I was listening to Sirius XM, and Harry Hood came on, and it was that from that show, and it started, and I was like in the car, and like people were getting out of the car, and like it was like 3 or 4 minutes into that song, and I'm like, I can't get up. Like I've got to listen to the rest of this song.
That's your first inclination to the band for sure. When you can't get out of the car, the jam's got to end.
It did. And it went a while. It was like, 15, 60-minute song. And I'm like, wow, this song is amazing. So then I went back and listened to that whole, and there were so many songs that night, like the Stash of that night, the Possum of that night was mind blowing. They teased Divided Sky in that Possum, which, I love Divided Sky. So that was a good night.
Nice.
Or would have been if I was there.
Well, no, but I think, that's the beauty of all of this catalog, right? Like there is a way to live vicariously through that moment, right? I think, there's roars of crowds where you hear it and you laugh because you're like, oh my God, yeah, of course they're roaring right now, right? Like listen to what they're hearing. That's probably why they get those memberships on Live Phish going all the time, What song would you recommend to others to get into the band?
I've thought about this, and I've sent different things over, and it's a hard choice to do that because it does depend on what they're doing. But I would say that Stash might be something that I think is pretty like appealing to the ear when someone's listening, at least from those older songs with a great sense of like a longer jam that kind of can go with it, which is not like a shorter song. So if I was going to introduce someone to like really what the band's capable of, but still very appealing and a good introductory song, I'd probably go Stash.
Yeah, I like it.
I must say on that there are so many newer songs that Trey has written recently that are just so amazing that there likely are a few more recent songs that I've grown to like.
Well, that's hard. I mean, like, and that's why I don't want ever this process to feel overwhelming to anybody because, being new to the band, that new song, that favorite song could be changing hourly sometimes, show to show. You're like, I haven't heard that song yet. I haven't heard that song yet, you know? And there was a time where I was chasing Vultures, the song Vultures. I could never get it. Never. You know, and like finally one day you're like, all right, today's the day we're gonna get it. It was a crazy version. It was everything I needed, and I haven't got one since, right? So I think it's all the beauty of the band is like whatever you're feeling at that moment, that day, there's something around to kind of change the mood, right? Because it's not something that there's just almost too much available to not find something that you're gonna jive with. You know, that in my opinion. What song are you hooked on right now?
Well, probably two. If we were to just go to one specific song from one specific show, it would be Possum 92 from that Union show. However, a song that another random song that probably is not on anyone's list right now is Silent in the Morning. I heard, maybe it's not, but I heard that show. I'm sorry, I heard that song like months ago, and then the way that what Trey does with his guitar on the tail end of that song is it like called my ear, but I didn't remember what it was. And then I was sitting there for weeks and weeks, like looking through songs, trying to figure out what the hell was that song that ended that way.
Yeah.
And then I heard it again, and it was Silent in the Morning. And I've listened to it 20 or 30 times this week, probably different shows.
The show I just did with Reed, he mentions that as being like one of the most pretty Phish songs. He's right. Like it's one of the most beautiful Phish songs about like a really not beautiful thing, but you know, it's about wanting a divorce. But like it's kind of funny that song is so gorgeous. Like just the tonality of that whole thing is beautiful. So yeah, I get stuck on that one every now and again too. Is there a place you'd like to see in like a venue or a spot that you would love to see the band?
I would say smaller venues. I don't actually know, I haven't been, I'm from Maryland, so there's a few venues there like that they've played at, but like I haven't been to a lot of different venues outside of MSG and SPAC and another place in Albany, the Times Union Center. And so I haven't seen them a lot or know what different venues really look like, I guess. However, I know that they played in Amsterdam, and I'm a big fan of Amsterdam and have been there, and it's beautiful. And if I probably were to go anywhere to see them, I'd like to see them there.
Yeah, that's not I haven't been there in a while, so they could pop over to Europe for a little tour. Why not? Why not?
They certainly could.
They surely could. Yeah, there's nothing stopping them. What's your favorite studio album?
Well, and I actually don't know how to pronounce this. Is it Junta or Junta?
Junta is the way I pronounce it, but
okay.
I know which one you're talking about.
yeah. I think that is the one that I come back to most often, as like really from front to back. I listen to it and love it. Maybe perhaps other albums I skip around, but that one, it's really caught me. So I listen to that one front to back.
Yeah, there's a lot there to unpack, right? To your point about those compositional pieces, right? That is really full of them, and you get a nice little, fee pops on in there, so they kind of mix it up a little bit from all of that compositions. But yeah, that's a good one to really build up a strong backbone of the of knowledge, because it's also a lot of what's still played today, right? There's still a lot of launching points coming off that album. Divide Skies, on it, right?
It is, yeah. So, and You Enjoy Myself. We haven't even mentioned Fluffhead. Like that was on there.
Right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Fluffhead. So
Fluffhead. Right. I've heard of that song. What's your favorite cover song they do right now?
There's two, and perhaps one from a recent show that I've been really into, more of a recent show. They played Strawberry Fields Forever, and they did it a cappella. Have you ever heard that?
I don't think so. Where was it from?
Was, Ohio. I'm going to say the word
wrong. No, yeah. You know what? I was supposed to be there, and I got COVID. That was really? My COVID. Yeah, that was a summer show, right? July. Yeah, my wife got me tickets, and I got COVID. I couldn't go.
Holy moly! So
I would have seen it. Yeah, great.
Have you heard it? Have you heard that song yet? Like, have you heard them do it?
I've heard them do. I thought a non-acapella version of it. But I have to go back. I know I listened to that show, but I have to go back and re-listen to that you brought that up, because it deserves a second shot.
I mean, yeah, like such a legendary song of Strawberry Fields Forever, and then for them to do that a cappella was pretty amazing. And like I didn't hear them do any a cappella songs at all, and then they come out with that song. I'm like, oh my god, like
That's a good one.
and so another song that I really love is a cover, although I don't necessarily, their version of it is like I perhaps enjoy the regular version of it, but I love the song so much. It's Quinn the Eskimo.
Yeah, well,
I
Dylan.
like that song so much, the way that Dylan did it, and so whenever it comes on, I'm all about it. When Phish does it, but Bob Dylan did it pretty good.
Yeah, Mike sings it pretty well. I like Mike's version. He
Yeah,
gets weird with it. So it's that's
he
always good when they
does.
bust that one out. You don't see that one a lot anymore. But that's a fun cover for sure. That's
Hmm.
definitely a fun one. So the last question I always ask is comes from you enjoying myself. So boy, man, God, or shit.
Yeah, and I did a little preparation for this, and like I love that part in the song, but I always really wondered what the intention of those lines were, and I've tried to do some research actually to understand what did they want to convey with those couple words. Um, and my initial thought was it goes from like this developing of a person, like we're a young boy,
Life
we
to
turn into a
death.
man, we die, we go to God, and then but I'm like, well, what does shit have to do with this? And so or maybe it's
Oh,
just like shit, I've
decomposition.
died. Okay, go ahead.
No, decomposition. That could be. I
Okay.
don't know. I'm just.
All right. Maybe.
I'm hyper. We're going back and forth here. Now you got me
I see.
thinking. So maybe it's decomposition if you're going to keep in that circular of life, analogy.
Yeah, I love that. But and so that's the way I always took it. And in that way, I'll certainly go, God, I love spirituality and the idea of God. And I certainly believe that we have a spirit that moves on and whether it comes back multiple times or not. I feel like there was a song, maybe it is in Strange Design. I feel like they that the part of the lyrics there was this like I've seen this happen once before. Like I took it as like, hey, like we have died, we have moved on. I know this. It has happened before. And that's the way I took that song. So God is where I go
Okay,
with that.
good. Well, that's what I use for the podcast. This happened once
I did
before, and
notice
that was,
that.
and I went with the other way with this, trying to relate to new fans to the band and let them know, like, hey, even when I got to know the band in '93, there was a scene going on before I got there too, right? Like nobody's fan
Mhm.
zero. This is all got a history to it.
Sure.
So the song that I like, the whole show that you and I are going to break down today and talk about. A couple days before the one you had mentioned that you had listened to by chance, which I think is really interesting.
Hmm.
But we are going to talk about 5/14/92, the Capitol Theater, Port Chester, New York. So first off, what I want to say about the Capitol Theater has a history in the jam band community. To the way back, long before Fed, when it was the Almonds and Dead, and it was always a place that national acts would go through as they were coming through the East Coast. I don't know. I'm not sure. I would assume it's after they played New York City. That was like the next stop would be Port Chester or how it works, just because I know where it is. But it's not the first time Fish played the Cap. And I was trying to really remember why I chose this show, because when I started choosing shows, it was based on quality bootlegs that I had hands on in the 90s, right? So
Hmm.
everything was on these little tapes. I'm older than you, so these little max out tapes, and they would break and run and break. You'd never find them again, hand them off, but quality was varied, to put it best, right? So when you
Sure.
got something that was so quality, you kind of held on to it tight. And I'm re-listening to the show. It became quite evident why not only was there a soundboard circulating, but why so many people had it. You talked earlier about the mystery, right? The mystery of the band, and there's the fun that they have with their audience, and this is a skeleton key for the uninitiated, essentially. Um, you know, if you are a young fan or a new fan finding them around the 90s and you're listening to bootlegs and they're doing things musically that the crowd's interacting with and you have no idea what's going on, you feel lost already, right? You feel like an outsider before you even started. So what I found once I went through this a couple times was this is the skeleton key to Phish. This is the one where they go, hey guys, come on in. We're going to show you real quick behind the curtain. And if you're still cool with seeing the magic, tell your friends and come on back. Right. So, ostensibly to your point, what you said about shows and set lists, you would look at this set list and you'd be like, okay, like there's nothing that jumps out at you. There's nothing crazy. But it's a very, very good encapsulation of who they are in 92. Their love affair with New York City area, that's Trey's old stomping ground, kind of grew up in that area of New York. And they prove it to this day. The Garden is their home, right? They do residencies there. So I think you hear it with the crowd and the energy of them. And then even listening to older shows now, what I really jumped out at me here is from the transition of, say, the 88s to 91s, you really hear Mike's presence in this show more than I think you hear in prior years, where his playing is, stepped up a level. His ideas are more introduced, I feel like, into some of the jams. So what was your feeling about this right off the bat when you saw what show we were going to talk about?
Well, I liked it. Of course we go through and we say, okay, what are those major songs that we know and like, and certainly there were several in each set that I was really a fan of already coming in. So I was like, okay, great. I can't wait to listen to them. And then there were a few songs I didn't really know much about in each set that I turned on to loving. So and there were certainly a few songs I'm like, all right, well, I could do without that one again. And I felt that one too. I guess.
And there's two of them in there we never hear again. Actually, there's two songs in here that are out of the playlist after this show. They no longer.
Well, I can't wait to hear which
haven't
ones
been
they
played
are.
since. Well, it's not the first one. We know that because they come out and they rip Susie Greenberg as an opener, and a song that is still, again, in rotation, but really like was a staple of almost an every nighter, every other nighter back then. Moved up and down the set list, fit anywhere you wanted it to play, from an opener to a first set closer to an encore or even a second set closer. It's that song I think a lot of the early fans knew and loved. And one of those that, we talk about a couple of times on the show is that never even been on an album. You talk about unpacking a band and they're like, hey, we're going to open up with a song that's not on any of our albums. How about that? Mm-hmm. What do you think about that, folks? Come on out.
Yes.
And then with like, all things considered, really just showing the chops after that, right? Like they go from rock and roll to like real straightforward, like, hey, we are insanely good musicians. Watch this.
So I'd never heard that song before, all things considered. And that is one I have listened to several different versions. They seem to play it very similar. I think through different versions I've heard.
I think there's a lot of variety to it, to your point. Yeah, I don't think that they jam out on that one. It's more of a composition piece.
But amazing. It's like
really technically,
wow, that's beautiful. Yeah.
That's I was like, oh, that's not one you would seek out, or to your point, you're like, oh, I'm not familiar with it. So, but it really was played incredibly well. The next run, I kind of lumped them in, even though they're not lumped in. But the run from Sloth, Sparkle, Maze is inspired playing, in my opinion, from them. Like, this is where they open up a little bit to the audience. Right here, you see, this is 92, so Rift isn't out yet. So there's two new songs there, right there with Sparkle and Maze, relatively new. But a 92 Maze is, I forgot what those were like.
And tell me the difference. I feel like much more intense. I feel that way around. Yeah, Speed. Yeah.
I think that's it was that, because that was the game, right? The game was tension and release, and how fast can we do this? And that was what got that first tipping point of, I keep calling it the rocket takeoff, right? Like that's where they were starting to take off. The crowds were getting larger. They were getting outside of bars and playing the Capitol Theater. They were now, they're a year away from playing a New Year's show at Worcester Centrum. So they're growing quickly at this point. They're in between albums. Nectar is out, which all things considered is on, and then Rift is about to come out. So you have a bunch of new songs in here mixed in with like some songs from uh, Nectar early on. But it's, to me, and I believe this was at the 7-minute mark of Maze. I wrote this down, that's really some really incredible playing from them. It's just it's right towards the end, but it's just the ability to make it all sound like it's about to fall apart at any given moment and have it not fall apart is the greatest gift that band gives me every time they do it.
Yeah, love that.
And that's really what I felt there, with that run. The Sloth is one of those songs from Gamehenge, as you mentioned earlier. And we get one later on with McGrupp that not heavily in rotation. Tila is another one right there, but Divided makes it, Wilson makes it. There's other songs that get played more often. So it's always good to get one of them, but like having them both in the same show here is a nice little treat later on. So they get through that run right there that I think, is, if you are a 92 fan, you got to be stoked, right? Like if this is the band you like and you see this is the direction that they're going, these new songs are next level when it's coming out of Nectar. You're not getting the long compositions that people would necessarily be familiar with from earlier, but now they're getting it down to like, Rift is a concept album. So now you have a whole album that's thematic. But let's see if we can get this thing distilled into like 6 minutes, 5 minutes, right? And you see that with, Sparkle's probably only 3 or 4 minutes, but it's a ridiculous song. That was one, you asked me like what was different back in the day. Probably age. Like it just felt like it was one of those songs that a million miles an hour, and you're just like, you thought you were going to fall apart, right? Like just because they were just going so fast. And I think that's something that it's difficult to replicate with age, like that's probably hard to do. And then Maze, in 92 Maze, like I said earlier, with Trace playing was just insane. Horn, which still new, right? Like I think there was a flub actually in the beginning. If you hear
they
it,
did.
right?
Yeah.
They messed it up. So still new in rotation, but already, right? So this is 92. We're talking about in between albums, and the crowd, these are relatively new songs, right? To what you were saying earlier about not there to hear anything, the radio hit, the thing. They're hearing new music and just loving it, right? Like some of these folks are the first time they're hearing the tracks through Rift, Horn included. Then we get a Reba, which you must have been happy to hear.
Yeah, I thought the Reba was really good, and of course the Reba, and I'm interested in hearing your perspective too of how it's transitioned through the years. But yeah, it's just more like just Trey going at it, and loved it. Like I loved that Reba.
Yeah, I think the difference between the Rebas or any of those, composition, like bigger fluff-ad kind, we get a fluff-ad later too, but a bigger composition piece from then to now is just probably the amount of hours put into practice it. Right. So the Gladwell 10,000 hours thing, right? They were probably doing that every 6 months on fluff-ad, right? Just because when you only have 100 songs, and Trey talks about that thing in the documentary, how he was a maniac and he would practice parts over and over and over and over again, right? So they prided themselves on that, right? Like that got them off as much as it got the audience off of being perfect, right? And I think that was probably something that would be difficult to deal with, right? Because like if you're just a little bit off, like that's not like that's not a lot of grace for success. But it also pushed them to do great things and try things like we were talking about, like paint, with that improvisational mindset that like to push you to places you wouldn't have gone before. Obviously, right? Because like you said, nobody else does it like them as well. Poor Heart, something off Nectar. I think it's real straightforward. Doesn't have a lot of variety over the years. Something that an early Mike song, which kind of sets the tone for what type of Mike songs. He's brought some really great songs. Like I don't know if you heard that new song "More" that he wrote. That's really
Oh
really
yeah,
good.
Moore's great.
That's a really great addition, and he's done some great stuff there. And Poor Heart was a song that was just, I think, heavy rotation because it's like a nice 3 minutes, and you're gonna get everybody firing up. Like you're gonna get the hootenanny started when it's like 3 minutes, and everybody's like, all right, and then right into My Friend, which I actually, the note I wrote here was, I actually appreciate this song more now than I think I
Hmm.
did then.
Okay, I liked it.
More, oh, yeah, and I think
Uh,
I just did it with another show, like it was the opener, and after listening to it, I'm like, man, this is a really, really good song, and it got lost for me over time with the mazes and the riffs and the sparkles because they're all on the same album. So it's like, you kind of get lost in the ones that, Maze was like my song for a long time. I was like, oh, I gotta hear Maze, gotta hear Maze. So coming back to that now was interesting with different ears, hearing old versions of the song and being like, yeah, that song was really good back then. Like, I wish I appreciated that more. I didn't like that as much as I do now.
mhm.
Bouncing, this was the radio song. This was the college radio song at the time. So, this is where you may have had folks who didn't know any other song but that.
I see. I didn't know
Yeah.
that. I didn't know that
Yeah.
that was what was playing.
No, I mean, depending on what college DJ was spinning at the time, it was but that would be the song that they were pushing off Long Boy. That was the single, for lack of a better term. But it was also, if you think about it, it's a real bubblegummy, kind of pop song. But it's an
Yeah, yeah.
earworm for sure. And I think still new enough at this point where it's sought after. Maybe we're a little less now, where people would rather hear it maybe a little less in rotation, or skip a couple of weeks playing it. But to me, it's one of those that they'll never do this, thank God. But if they ever did a greatest hits album, it would probably be on there, right? Like that's how I like it bounced. And then the Skeleton Key, right? What we were
Loved
talking
it.
about earlier. Did you like
Loved
this
it.
one? So
Had
as
no idea it
someone,
was coming, and I loved
yeah,
it.
okay, good. This is this is this is what I wanted to get to. So as someone coming at this, and with new eyes and a new perspective, how did this resonate with you?
Well, I was listening to it through initially, and I think I was doing other things at the time, so it was just like in the background, and like I found myself like not really knowing it was Run Like an Antelope to start, and like because I didn't know that song really well, and so I'm like loving the jam that's going on in the beginning of that, and then I'm like queuing into him talking, which he feels like he rarely does, and unless he's described like telling a story or
Yeah,
whatnot. So
right.
I'm like, oh, he's talking. What is he talking about? And so he starts going into like going through these signals, which funny enough, when we talk about the show 3 days later in Schenectady, like they do they do several of these signals, which I'm like, man, like what the hell are these like things he's doing? And people are responding. I didn't know. I've never heard of these in that show 3 days later. So now it was like this eureka moment for me where he got to describe everything I was like listening to days later, and really what going through all five signals, which perhaps is this the only time he's ever done that? Like where
I
he's
think there's
gone
an
through all
older
five?
show. I think there's one from like Boston early on in 89, 90, 91, somewhere, where he explains it to the, all right, here's what we're going to do, kind of thing. And
Mm-hmm.
tell your friends, like there's a whole tell your friends kind of thing to it. So yeah, I think to me, this is a shining example of like the whole thing is an inside joke,
Mm-hmm.
right? And how daunting it could be getting into this band at any given point of the carnation of this band, right? They're not even in 10 years yet. They're at 9 years, somewhere around there at this point. And they're like, they got a fan base that they have inside jokes with that they feel the need now they need to explain to other people because their fan base is growing so large.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy, right? I think that's an amazing, again, back to the word of mouth, hustling on the road, all those things that they do to get to this point. Um, do you, did it make you feel better as a new fan knowing that like, okay, there's just this thing has just been going on for so long, like all the layers of this thing is just been forever?
It did, like, yes, it made me feel like starting to understand the little things that most people wouldn't know about them. Like I'm getting like deeper in. I did feel that way. But then I also wondered, like, they don't do any of those things now, right?
Not
No,
really. No, I mean they
no.
did some different stuff back then. I mean there was a show they handed out macaroni and cheese boxes and like had people play, and
Oh,
there was
really?
a
Yeah.
there for a tour they used they did something called the Big Ball Jam where they would have these giant balls and they would throw them out to the audience, and like each ball corresponded with a member of the band and they would try to play like that, so they've tried to how to try to interact with folks who, like we talked about at the top of this, like love that interaction, right? So it's like what else can we do to make this more fun? And yeah, I think like we said, they just do that on a more grander scale now than they did with like a chessboard in '95. That's the
Mhm.
difference, I think. But I think it was a really cool way to close the set. And I think what I liked what you said there is that you heard it 3 days later, right, with no prompting,
Mhm.
right? So like there wasn't even the audience was learning it for the most part. I mean, we're only talking like 60 miles difference between Port Chester and upstate, right? We're not that far from where they are. Uh, and a nice chunk of the crowd seems to know the call and response already. So
Yes.
that's
And back
pretty
then,
insane.
the internet wasn't. I
No,
don't think the internet was even out there. Like it
it
was.
was
I don't, so
it existed in a like big computer room sense, but not like in
uh,
a supercomputer in your pocket sense. No, we weren't
yeah,
at
yeah,
that
yeah.
point yet.
So the
Uh,
communication of these things was
yeah,
amazing.
that's
Yeah.
and that's part of probably why we talked about this bootleg tape spreading so readily back then, this quality soundboard of it, because it really was, other fans needed to hear it, right? Like, hey, when you're at the show, this happens, you got to do that.
Hmm.
So that closes the first set with an amazing 92 Antelope with, again, opening up the curtain to the folks and saying, next time we're here, next time you see us, you hear this, do that. And I think that to me, when I came back to it this time around, was cool because it kind of fit into what I'm trying to do here, right? Like just be like, hey, look, this has always been some kind of inside joke to somebody, and we're just gonna have the inside jokes keep going. So the second set comes out, a real first two, very '90s, early '90s songs with Glide. I know they started messing around with that at one point, but this is pretty much the most straightforward glides you can get.
And I love Glide. Like I've heard Glide before. And again, if like we go back to some what I really love, it's like if we maybe look at an earlier song from the set or the first set, it was All Things Reconsidered, where Trey just does a nice little beautiful part with his guitar, and I feel like Glide is feel like very similar, where it's like a nice, like very melodic way that he plays the guitar in that song, and it like catches the ear, and so that gets me going. I definitely tune into Trey. I want to hear more about what you at some point where you were talking about perhaps Mike was more involved, because I find when I listen to Phish, my ear tends to go to Trey, and so so I have to almost try to pull out some of the other instruments, which I do when I'm really trying. But Trey is who I hear, and
Mm-hmm.
a song like Glide is captures him, and Rift is another song like that. Like so.
You hit it right
Anyway,
on the head with riffs,
yeah.
and I have a note here for that. So to that question, to that point, I'm on one point on Glide. You had mentioned about
Hmm.
Evening Song when you saw Bethel was Glide. I have like a mind's eye memory of one summer, and it was an opener, and like like we were on some mountain, outside somewhere, and it was just a great opener for a beautiful summer day. That was fantastic. But where we go into with Mike's is this is Cavern. I feel like this is where Mike really enters the show.
Mm.
You really start to hear his bass turn up. You really started him in the mix. And I think to your point, listening wise, especially in these years, Trey was the price of admission. That's what they were coming to see, the guitar guru, right? And I think that's where you hear it in the mixes. And as the more you listen to and the more you hear different songs, like, oh, what that little cool turn of phrase. That was Page, that was, um, I, to me, they're at their best when they're the four-headed monster, when I could just close my eyes and it just sounds like one noise, and it's
Yes,
not
love it.
four different instruments. And it's hard, right? Because you do have to focus. Like you said, like I have to focus, and you do, because it's hard to overcome that. But Cavern, Mike really gets turned up in the show here, and he just stays there the rest of the way. Really, really funky playing in that. But what's funny is that he goes nuts there, and then in the next song in Rift, listening to that, I just read this recently that one of Trey's insane abilities, like it was like one of those ranking lists, and it was like he's a lead guitarist who plays his own rhythm guitar. So he's the lead and rhythm guitarist in the band, right? And I think if you go back and listen to Rift, that riff right there, you can hear the duality of that really, really clearly. Because when I read that, and it's been pretty recently, I read that last couple of months, I was like, whoa, never 30 years listening to this band, never thought of it that way. And like, yeah, he does both. That's how good he is, right? So that really made an impression on me, was that example of his abilities there to be both, right? And really stand out. Fluffhead, right? Here comes Fluff. I think everybody probably knows it's coming. It's the biggest song in the second set here. But this era of Phish is what we talked about earlier, right? This is about perfection. This is about how good are we that we can take these beautiful compositions with 20 something changes that Fluffhead has or something, and like make them all land every single jump, right? And they do, like this era of Phish is pretty flawless when it comes to some of these bigger compositions. Because I believe, like we were talking about practice, probably where a lot of the time and attention was going to, was mastering these things. So Fluffhead, fantastic. Now we get into the first song that is the last time ever played, Eliza. That is a song written, Trey wrote for his girlfriend at the time, who's now his wife. So that's, it's a nice song. It's on Nectar, but just kind of feels very, not dated, but timely, timed in that era. And then to me, we get into the best part of the show. This Mike's through Stash is really something insane. Absolutely ferocious is what I wrote about Mike's song. The whole, not the whole suite, but just Mike's song there. Between him and Trey is just absolutely ferocious for the whole song. Amazing playing for both of them. They go into the transition into Weekapaw, and then we get to the second song we haven't heard that gets dropped, which is that Wait. It's in the middle of Weekapaw. So that started out as a joke. I had to go back and see what it was. I was like, it almost sounded like one of a practicing improv thing. And
I didn't think it was a song.
No, it was a joke they used to do to an audience, like where they pretended they would mess up and wait, and start again. Oh, wait, that kind of thing. But that's something that kind of gets lost on tape, right? Like, or lost in a copy of the show. So good thing that kind of gets dropped, because much like the other stuff, right? It's not the signals, that kind of thing is no longer part of what they do. Mike's playing continues solid through Stash. I mean, I know you love Stash, so what were your thoughts there?
Well, I mean, it was a great Stash. Intense. Like I've listened to a lot of Stashes more recently, and then going back, clearly a big difference between Stash now and Stash then was just the intensity of Trey just slaying it, like and going at it, which is very different from Stash now. So I loved it. And it's the first time I've ever heard of McGrupp. I had not even heard of that song before this, and so I was pleasantly surprised by that as well.
Yeah, and you mentioned Gamehenge earlier, so that's like one of those tracks from Gamehenge that definitely doesn't get played enough, and people are like, oh, that's Gamehenge? Yeah, sure. Another song that doesn't get played enough. So Trey, after Stash puts down the guitar, moves over to the drums for Cold as Ice, so that Fishman can come out and do Cracklin' Rosie, which I think that's one of the best covers he does. No name though, he just no introduction. He just came out. No, here's Greasy Physique or John B. Fishman or anything like that. He just came out and nailed Cracklin' Rosie. And then a 10-minute possum to close the show, send everybody home.
Yes, and then the possum was great. However, the possum in 2 to 3 days, it was so good. And so if you haven't heard that possum, like, and I think that there's some feedback that I have read that Trey had said that was their best possum to date. Like so that is something to watch, like to listen to.
I just wrote it down. Just wrote it down.
And when I was listening, I was busy doing something else, and I'm like, holy shit. And I moved back and like I restarted the song, and I think it was a 13-minute song where they actually started in that song, they started with the signals for the first 3 to 4 minutes of that song, which is probably where I wasn't cued in. And then all of a sudden, like, they just started ripping. I'm like,
Hellfire.
So it was good. It was really good.
That's great. And then, the two really fun closers in the encore with Sleeping Monkey, which for a joke song has the best ripping guitar solo at the end ever. I just love the way that song ends, even though, it's a really hysterical song. And, to make Tennessee proud, the Rocky Top cover, which, was a precursor to kind of like the bluegrass mode they were going to get into in the next, year or two. They're going to start learning how to play all those bluegrass instruments. And that video is out online somewhere if you haven't seen it, of them practicing with Jeff Mosier, learning how to play bluegrass on the bus in '94 and stuff. So it's kind of the beginning of that, hey, what are we going to do next? They're making friends down south with Widespread Panic and Colonel Bruce and all those people. So it's their musical horizons have expanded as well. So would you recommend this as a show for a new fan to listen to?
I would just in the kind of the creativity of the set, the sets. And I think that the antelope that they played that put those signals in, I think everyone deserves to have a listen to that. And just spread along are some just really, really fantastic songs. And some that I had never heard before that really, like, I have listened to several times since, All Things Reconsidered. I'd not heard that. And then what was the song I got to go back to the list here. Song in the second last, Cavern, which is obviously a popular song, yeah, but I had not really heard that before either. So so Cavern got me going on to their lyrics. I'm like, wow, what is he trying to say here? And so like really trying to dissect the lyrics, because there was a lot on that. I absolutely would recommend this.
There's only one lyric that matters in that song. Just take care of your shoes. That's all.
Yes. So, they're popular lyric there.
And now, what song would you recommend? What show would you recommend to me post 2000?
Well, I think it would be certainly that, that obviously that Union show from '92. But then outside of that, we're looking at a show that I keep coming back to, 8/2/22 from Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. I think that is the show that I find myself coming back to, just because they have a lot of jams in that show, a lot of jams, and that opening, Strawberry Fields Forever, is fantastic. We've got a Shade is a song that is my girlfriend, it's a personal song together. I love 46 Days, which we haven't mentioned. Punch You in the Eye. They've got a Yem there. The Sense and Subtle Sounds, Split Open and Melt, Bathtub Gin in 2001. There's so many. And a 25-minute Free is in that lineup.
So you're gonna really regret. It's gonna be worse than COVID now. I'm gonna really regret missing this show. So I appreciate that. But I'm definitely gonna give this one a listen. I appreciate it. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. This was a really great conversation. And any questions or anything like that, feel free to shoot them my way. I'd love to talk anytime about Phish. So good luck getting to the next show, and have fun and keep exploring this band, man. It was really nice meeting you.
You as well. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks, pal. Enjoy the day.
From my only breath that I have breathed since I was 10. I hope this happens once again.
Thanks for listening. If you're an older fan who'd like to recommend a show from 1988 to 1996, or a new fan who'd like to be part of an upcoming episode, email the show at happenedoncebefore@gmail.com. Again, thanks for listening, and I hope this happens once again.
Thoughts from my only breath that I have breathed since I was 10. I hope this happens once again.